Hello friends, you can support me by subscribing to my channel to be informed about the new videos and liking my videos. It was a hot summer day. I woke up to the sound of the alarm ringing at 6 in the morning. I got up and went to the bathroom, took a relaxing shower, and then made myself my favorite coffee. Then I sat down at the computer. Today was somewhat important for me, because I was going to face the smallest lion I have ever faced until now. My family has been in France for many years and I live alone. I love doing this job. I have had many patients, and even became friends with some of them. I have never left any of my jobs half done, nor ended them wrongly. The satisfaction of my patients has always been important to me. Now, I couldn't refuse when an old friend asked for my help. A 9-year-old boy is not feeling well, constantly fighting with his family, and exhibiting strange behaviors. According to what my friend described, he has been like this for the past week, and he said it would be beneficial for him to meet with me. So I told him it wouldn't be a problem, that I was available today and would meet with him. I finished a few tasks on the computer, got ready, and left the house. I was in the office at 8:30. I had just arrived when the lion I was waiting for came a few minutes later. He was accompanied by his mother, father, and an uncle. I told them that I couldn't take everyone inside, they had to leave the child alone with me. Despite the father's objection, saying, "He's feeling a bit off, let me stay with him at least for today," I couldn't allow it. However, both the mother and the father looked quite bad. In his first session, I thought that maybe having his mother or father by his side, even asking them a few questions, would be beneficial. However, I could only take one person, that child, inside with me. The father entered with the child. As I do in every session, with every patient, I had left the camera on beforehand. I wanted to watch this conversation again later. Although the father looked nervous, the little boy was quite relaxed. To make them more comfortable, I first offered the child to take some candy. He looked at me first, then at the candy, and gently shook his head, indicating that he didn't want it. First, I asked some questions to the child and the father. The answers were quite normal. His name was Semi, and he said he constantly felt tired. I didn't intend to tire him out in the first session anyway. I took part in another session a few days later, and this time I was going to talk to that child alone. A few days later, he came with only his father this time. When I asked whether I should lock the door or leave it open, he didn't respond. Before going to my desk, I turned on the camera. I sat face to face, not behind my desk. I asked him again if he wanted to take some candy. He nodded slightly. Last time we couldn't be alone. If you want, let's start from scratch this time. My name is Melis. What's your name? I asked. He was looking down, not looking at us. This child, who was more active last time, didn't want to talk about anything this time. I gave him some time to relax. But we can't get anywhere if you don't talk like this. Tell me, what do you like? Eating, drinking, traveling? I mean, tell me what you like the most, I said. Still no answer. So I stared at the child. He was constantly rubbing his hands. When I asked him, "Can I hold your hand?" he pulled his hand towards himself and hid those little fingers from me. There was something strange about this little child. Later, I mentioned a superhero name that I thought he would like. Lying to the child, I said, "Do you know, my son loves him too? I can even say he is his favorite." So, which superhero do you like? Don't you have a favorite superhero? How strange. Still no answer from the child. I asked a few more questions again. He didn't answer. There were exactly 3 minutes left to the end of the session. While sitting silently, I was waiting for him to look at my face and say a single word to me when finally my wish came true. He slowly lifted his head from the ground and looked into my eyes. He was trying to answer all the questions I asked in one breath. He was speaking so fast that I had difficulty understanding what he was saying. I was giving all my attention to him. The session was over. Even 5 to 10 minutes had passed. I was still listening to the child. This was not something I normally do. But there was a different energy in this child. I didn't want to interrupt him. The child was speaking without even taking a breath. He was a bit tense while speaking. I saw that his face was red and he needed to breathe. I went to him, put my hand on his shoulder. "Okay, calm down. Everything is fine," I was going to say, when suddenly he started screaming. I had to back off when he screamed. When he saw me backing off, he hesitated. He kept looking at my face. There was a very angry, quite scary smile on his face. He stood up and went towards the door without taking his eyes off me. He opened the door and went out. I was frozen in my place. What were the events that just happened? I was having difficulty making sense of it. I looked at the clock. It was time for me to go home. I was already very tired at work today. Plus, this incident confused me even more. I quickly got ready and went home. As soon as I got home, I threw myself into the shower because I was stifled from the heat. I took a nice shower and wore something comfortable. Then I sat down at the computer, but I couldn't focus. My mind was always on that child. I remembered the camera, but I was too lazy to go back to the office. I said I would examine it when I went to the office tomorrow and went to bed. That night I had a strange dream. I was constantly running in the darkness. The sound of the alarm woke me up from this dream and my whole body was aching. I barely made my breakfast and then went to the office, and the first thing I had to do was to charge the camera, but the camera was still recording. The battery had not decreased at all. I looked at the clock. My patient would come in half an hour. I wanted to watch the footage I shot yesterday until he came. I opened the camera and started watching. Everything looked normal. The child came in and sat down. Everything was normal until here. Then the camera seemed to break. It was not working. What was that? What was that child doing here in the middle of the night? How did he get in here? What am I experiencing like this? The camera had shut down because I threw it on the ground. It was not working. Anyway, I definitely don't remember what I talked to my patient that day, what I told him. Today I didn't have many patients. I had 2, and unfortunately, I had to cancel one of them. I went home in the afternoon. I had brought the camera home with me. I did everything I could to turn it on, but in vain. It wouldn't turn on. I took it to a close friend to get it fixed. "I'll sort it out in 2 hours, you can come and pick it up," he said. "Okay," I said and left there. I was feeling quite tired. After working a bit on the computer at home, my phone rang. It was my friend calling. I was happy when he said that he had fixed my camera and I could pick it up. At least I wouldn't have to buy a new camera. My friend said, "I will pass by your house in half an hour. If you want, I can drop off the camera." This was better for me. I thanked him and hung up the phone. While preparing something to eat for the evening in the kitchen, the door rang. I quickly headed towards the door. When I opened it, my friend was at the door. When I asked him, "Weren't you going to come in half an hour?" he said nothing. He just extended the camera, handed it over, and left. As he was moving away from the house, he occasionally looked back, smiling strangely. I didn't understand anything. I closed the door, went inside. I left the camera on the table, went back to the kitchen. While I was preparing the meal, I noticed strange sounds coming from the living room. Since my hands were not clean, I looked into the living room without touching anything from the kitchen door. Strange, there was nothing. I was frankly curious about where this sound came from. I went back to the kitchen, prepared the meal, left my food on the stove, and went to the living room. When I entered, I couldn't believe my eyes. The living room was in a mess. No item was in its place. If a burglar had entered, at least I could hear the noise of so many things being scattered, broken, shattered, but I hadn't heard anything. In fact, I looked into the living room a few minutes ago. It wasn't like this. Just as I was about to call the police, I noticed that the camera was on. The camera was working. I left it here closed, I was sure. How was it working? How was it recording? I wondered if it recorded what happened here. I immediately opened the camera. I was literally speechless in front of what I saw. There were entities in the house that I had never seen before, even unaware of their existence, pitch black, faceless, and moving quite fast. They were roaming all over the house. It was quite scary. In fact, one of them was standing at the kitchen door watching me. When I looked into the living room from the kitchen door, there was only a tiny distance between us, but I couldn't see them. I went back to the kitchen. After I went to the kitchen, it was as if there was an earthquake and everything in the living room was turned upside down. Unable to stand any longer, I fell to my knees and started crying out of fear. As I dropped the camera and wanted to run towards the door, I heard someone calling me from behind. At that moment, I could feel my body freezing. My feet seemed glued to the ground. I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't move, walk, or scream. I was just standing there. Someone was calling my name with a very slow voice tone. I could hear the footsteps coming towards me. I felt someone standing right behind me. They put their hands on my shoulder. They brought their face close to my ear and whispered, "I can feel the warmth of the blood circulating in your veins. I am very curious about its taste." I couldn't stand what happened anymore and fainted. When I woke up, I didn't know what time it was. I immediately got up and turned on the light. The surroundings were quite calm and orderly. I was scared. I took my keys and phone and left the house. I had no idea where to go, but I couldn't stay in this house. I went to the house of Sedan, an old friend of mine. He opened the door. I went inside. I was undecided about whether to tell what happened or not. Being a psychologist, I didn't know how he would react if I told him such things. I just said that I experienced very strange things and couldn't make sense of what happened, asking for his help. I told him what happened, albeit with difficulty. He just listened without saying anything. And finally, he formed a sentence. "Melis, normally if I experienced these things, I would come to you and you would show me a way. It's really strange for you to come and tell me these now. I don't know what to say, but I know one thing. What you experienced is not normal at all. You are a smart person. I can't believe you experienced such a thing. I can't say anything." We looked at each other for a few minutes without saying anything. Then Seda said, "If you want, I can make a coffee. Let's stay awake and look for a solution." I said that would be good. I went to the kitchen with Seda. After a few minutes, she called me. I went to the kitchen, but Seda wasn't there. However, the coffees were on the table. I thought she called me to take the coffees. I took the coffees and came to the living room. I sat back on the couch, took a sip of coffee, and put it back. The moment I drank the coffee, I had a very bad pain in my stomach. It felt like something was piercing my stomach. Suddenly, I looked at the cup. There was blood in it, not coffee. Just as the teapot on the stove was boiling over, the blood in the coffee cup was doing the same. I couldn't stand it. I ran towards the bathroom to vomit. Seda appeared at the bathroom door. She looked at me sinisterly, smiling at me with a very strange facial expression. She tried to strangle me by tightening my throat. Her eyes were pitch black. She was saying something in a language I didn't understand. It seemed like she was threatening me. My vision was getting dark. I thought I was dying. Then I woke up to Seda's voice. I had fallen asleep on the couch. Seda put her hand on the coffee cup on the table. "Are you okay? You were probably having a dream." she said. When I opened my eyes, I realized I had a nightmare. I didn't know whether to be glad that what I saw just now wasn't real or to be upset about why I am experiencing these things. I got up. I think it would be good if I washed my face, I said, and went to the bathroom. I washed my face several times with cold water and came back to myself a little. I went back to the living room and sat next to Seda. Looking into her eyes, I said, "Look, you are scaring me too. Don't lose yourself this much. Everything will be fine, trust me." Holding her hand. I didn't sleep at all that night. Seda and I talked until the morning. In the early hours of the morning, I said, "I should go home now. I need to change my clothes to go to work." She said, "Wear my clothes and go. It's not a problem." "Go home, then if you go to work, you will be late. Besides, we didn't sleep all night. Don't tire yourself. Be comfortable. This is your home. You can come and go whenever you want." As she said, I wore Seda's clothes and went to work. Everything was progressing normally. A few days after that incident, I had another session with that child. I was very hesitant about whether to enter that session or accept that patient. However, it was necessary to understand what happened to that child. Therefore, I had to conduct this session not alone but with someone else. I asked a noble friend who does the same job as me. Thankfully, he didn't refuse me. In fact, this time I would record with 2 cameras to secure the job. The session had started. My friend was not saying anything, he was just sitting in a corner and watching. I asked the child a few things again. His head was down again. This time my perspective had changed while asking him questions. Because what I saw on the camera and the events I experienced changed my perspective. I definitely couldn't talk to him. Whatever I asked remained unanswered. The session was over. When I told him that the session was over and we could meet in the next session, he raised his head and looked into my eyes. He wasn't saying anything, just looking. When he looked, I felt my body lock. It was exactly the same as the event I experienced in my house before. I had felt a hand on my shoulder. Those hands were slowly wrapping around my throat again. At that moment, my friend couldn't understand why I wasn't reacting. We were looking at each other with the child. His eyes suddenly turned black and he fell to the ground, breaking his own neck. I closed my eyes and started screaming. I couldn't stop the tears flowing from my eyes. I was shouting to keep that child away from me. My friend took me to the hospital. They gave me a sedative injection. I was thinking but couldn't respond. In the hospital room, staring at the ceiling, my friend sat next to me and held my hand. "Melis, what happened to you? I have known you for years. You are not such a weak person. Please tell me what you are thinking, what you are feeling," he said as my phone rang. Erdem answered my phone, spoke for a few seconds, and hung up. He turned to me and said, "The person who repaired your camera called. A guy named Salim was asking why you haven't picked up the camera yet." I couldn't speak. I was just crying silently. I couldn't work for a while. I was constantly taking sedative drugs. I only calmed down when I took those drugs. The terrifying entities in front of my eyes, the hands pulling me from my feet while sleeping at night, the entities sleeping with me in my bed, I couldn't react to any of them. I was living as if it was a normal thing. All of this was exhausting me. I wanted to return to my family, but my family was in France. If I wanted to go to them, I had to disrupt all this established order. I had to leave my husband, office, car, and house here and go. It was very difficult for me. My life was in danger. However, I didn't know whether this danger would follow me wherever I went, whether it would leave me alone. The only thing I could do was to take those drugs and walk around like a dead person. A few weeks had passed since this incident. I was about to go completely insane. I wasn't talking to my family. I wasn't seeing them. Frankly, I couldn't look at the phones. Only occasionally my friends were coming to check if I was okay. One day in the afternoon, my door rang. My friend was there, and with him was a woman in her 50s. When I opened the door, I invited Mr. Serdar and his guest inside. I asked him who this woman was. He said she was someone who could help you. The woman looked at me carefully and then said, "What happened to you?" She was looking into my eyes. She took my face into her palms and looked into my eyes. At that moment, it was as if a storm broke out inside me. I started crying. It felt like this was the person I had been waiting for a long time, the person who would be the solution to my problem. I couldn't stand it and started crying. When my friend saw me like this, he immediately stood up to try to calm me down. But the woman didn't allow it. She said, "Leave her to me." She laid me down on the couch, put her hand on my forehead, closed her eyes, and said, "Just bring to mind what you have experienced so far." I did as she said, trying to bring to mind what I had experienced. It was very difficult for me, but if I did what she said, it felt like it would give me peace. A few minutes later, she took her hand off my forehead, took out a blank paper and pen from her bag, and started writing something. She said, "Get up, take a shower, clean yourself nicely, never part with this paper." I did as she said, went to the shower. When I came out of the shower, I saw the woman sprinkling water all over the house from a bottle she had in her hand. She was saying something, reading something. Normally, I didn't believe in such things. Paranormal events, or the existence of jinn entities always seemed strange to me. I mean, normally I thought these kinds of things had a scientific explanation. But this time it wasn't like that. I came out of the bathroom and sat on the couch. Seda had prepared something to drink. The woman went through all the rooms, reading something over the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, everything. Then she came to me, read something in front of my face, and blew several times. She said, "Open your palms." She read prayers and blew on my palms. Then she read things that were meaningless to me over me. I hadn't felt this relaxed for a long time. There was a freshness in it. That woman stayed in my house until the evening. She did a lot of things to relax me, to get me out of this trouble. I realized she was doing her best. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask, "Why are you doing this?" or "What is this for?" As she did things, the burdens on my shoulders were lifted. I had no idea what she was doing. She gave me a small book. "Read this every night before going to bed and put it by your bedside," she said, and left my house. A few days everything went fine. Months passed and I had returned to my old routine. I remembered the cameras, and when I looked back, there was nothing strange. When I looked at my friend Erdem's camera, there were only my cries and screams. I wanted to go after that child again. And the next day, we arrived near where the child lived. After looking around for a few seconds, as I headed towards the door of the house, the woman held onto my arm and said, "Wait, look at the window." There was someone watching us from the window. As I was about to call out and ask them to look, the woman told me to be quiet and to go outside. I asked her why we were leaving. We had come all this way. They were inside. "Let's go in and talk. Let's see how the child is." She said, "My girl, listen to me, go outside." Just as we were about to step out of the door, a sound came from inside the house. It was strange and quite frightening. We quickly exited through the garden gate. The woman was constantly reading something. She wanted us to get away from there quickly. But what I couldn't understand was why she was doing this. We had been looking for this house since morning. We had come a long way to get to this house. Why was she insisting we leave hastily now? I didn't want to move away any further. She stopped in the middle of the road. When I asked why we were going back and if she could please explain something, she said, "There is no human living inside that house. There isn't even an entity resembling a human inside that house, my girl. Don't probe any further into what happened to that child." Entering that house, getting close to it, probing this matter is beyond me. It will destroy you. So, I think you should stop probing now. That house has been claimed. If we enter, we might not be able to come out again. Remember what you experienced, they were just a warning to you," she said, and turned around and walked away. We immediately followed her. She might have been right about what she said. But I had dozens of questions nagging at me. What happened to the child? I had no idea, not even a single clue. What had happened to the child? What happened to his family? Who were the entities watching us from the window of the house? The sounds coming from the house, and many more unexplained questions. I didn't know what was happening. All of these left a question. This was the first time something like this had happened to me. Maybe if that woman wasn't there, I would have entered and never been able to come out. I don't know what would have happened to me. I experienced something I will never forget in my life. I gave years to work in this field, to be successful in this field. I studied, took lessons, and understood that some things are taught to you by life. You can learn some things without reading. Instead of spending years learning some things, you can take the lesson of your life in a few days. I couldn't get over this incident for a long time, and I couldn't tell anyone either. There are many things that I am afraid to articulate. I just want you to know that life is sometimes very strange. It doesn't go as you want. You plan different things, but life has already made a plan for you. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe.